Greetings everyone, hope we are okay. Welcome to today's session. Alright, so in today's session I'm going to start looking at quadratic equations. And like I mentioned in the previous session, quadratic equations are very similar to quadratic expressions. The only difference is that quadratic equations are equated to a zero, while quadratic expressions are not equated to any value, and the phrasing also is different. Quadratic expressions are phrased as factorize completely, while quadratic equations are phrased as solve the equations, and then solve the equation rather. And then for the answers, quadratic expressions require you to only have one answer, but quadratic equations require you to have two answers. So for example, if the variable in question is x, like in this example, you notice on your exam paper, it's going to indicate the part where you're supposed to write the answer. It's going to say x is equal to dash or dash. So it's going to say something like x is equal to this or that, implying that you need to find two values for x, one to plug in there and the other to plug in there. Whereas when you're dealing with quadratic expressions, the answer space is just going to be like that. Okay, but the process for solving is actually the same as when you're solving quadratic expressions, except for quadratic equations, there is an extra step at the end. All right, so you notice the general formula is the same. The only difference is that we have a value there that we are equating to 2, which is a 0. Otherwise, the solving process, we need to find the values of a, b, and c. We need to find the sum, the product, the factors. We factorize by grouping, and then we finish off. So that is pretty much what we're supposed to do. All right, so let us get started. All right, for the first one, the question says solve the equations. Actually, all these are exam questions, and they're the ones we're going to be using for today's session. So the first thing we do is we check, is our equation written according to the general formula, where you have the first term should have a squared variable, the second term should have a variable raised to the power of 1, and then the last one should be a constant. At this point, I expect you to understand what I'm talking about, and I should expect you to know to say a, b, and c in the formula are representing numbers. So you can see here, we can compare with this one. The first term quite right has a variable raised to the power of 2, but the second term is a constant. So we need to swap this one and this one in order for us to have the equation written according to the quadratic formula. So this is the correct format. At this point, we can now extract the values of a, b, and c. And then we can also come up with our sum, our product, and then finally our factors. So what is our a? Our a is going to be 2. Our b is a coefficient of x, which is a 1. Our c is a constant, which is negative 3. Okay, our sum is the same as the value for b. And then our product, we get the product by multiplying a times c, so it's going to be 2 times negative 3, giving us negative 6. At this point, we need to find the factors. In order for us to find the factors, we need to list the factors of the product, which is our negative 6 there. That is our product. So what are the numbers that can go into negative 6 without leaving a remainder? We start with the smallest number. So the smallest number that can go into negative 6, let's just go for the 6 for now. The smallest number is a 1. We need to pair this one with another number that can go into 6 without leaving a remainder. So what I advise doing is you simply divide that number with the number you have picked to find the next number to pair it with. So 6 divided by 1 is going to give us a 6. The other number that can go into 6 is what? It's a 2. Okay, the next smallest number we divide to find the number to pair it with. So 6 divided by 2 gives us a 3. At this point, we have listed all the factors of 6. The next important thing to do now is to make sure that the biggest number in each bracket has the same sign as the sum. Our sum is a positive, so meaning our 6 there is supposed to be a positive, and the 3 there is supposed to be a positive. And then we can go ahead and test. When we multiply these values, are they giving us negative 6? If they are not, then we have to do something to the signs. So you notice positive 1 times positive 6 will give us positive 6. It's not giving us negative 6. And since we have already determined that this 6 is supposed to be positive, meaning the 1 is on that's supposed to be negative, so that when we multiply negative 1 times positive 6, we get a negative 6. Even here, we already determined that the 3 is supposed to be positive, meaning it is a 2 that is supposed to be negative, so that when we multiply negative 2 times positive 3, it gives us a negative 6. At this point, that test has been passed. We can now go ahead and do the last test. So for the last test, we need to try which of these brackets can we add to give us positive 1. So we're going to say negative 1 plus positive 6 is going to be negative 1 plus 6, giving us positive 5 as our final answer. So this bracket has not given us positive 1, meaning these are not the numbers we're looking for. Let's try these others. Negative 2 plus 3, this gives us positive 1, meaning these are the numbers we are looking for. So those are the two factors we've actually been looking for. At this point, we're going to check the question. What variable are they using in the question? They're using an x. So meaning we simply need to add an x to each of these values. So we're going to have negative 2x and positive 3x. Actually, at this point, we're supposed to do this. Since this is a quadratic equation, you always have to equate it to 0. There are times they'll give you a question that looks like a quadratic expression. For example, they'll just say, solve the equation, and then they will not add equal to 0 here. Okay, it will look as if it's an expression because expressions are not equated to anything. As you are solving, you need to equate the same question that looks like an expression to 0 to make it an equation. Alright, at this point we can now substitute these values into the sum or the middle term. So let us check. This negative 2x can best be paired with 2x because from here we're supposed to factorize by grouping. So to avoid the unnecessary stage of rearranging terms, as we are placing them from there into the middle term, we can actually arrange them in such a way that each pair has something in common. So we'll pair this with the 2x squared and then the 3x with the negative 3. So then you're going to say 2x squared, this one is a negative, minus 2x, and then this one is a positive, plus 3x, and then we bring down the negative 3, and then we say is equal to 0. At this point, we're going to put them in brackets, like that. Okay, 3x minus 3 is equal to 0. Then we factorize this bracket. So what is common there? 2x is common. 2x squared divided by 2x, we're going to get x. Negative divided by positive is negative. 2x divided by 2x will give us a 1. What is common there? A positive 3 is common. We factorize. 3x divided by 3 gives us x. Negative divided by positive is negative. 3 divided by 3 is a 1 equal to 0. We check. Do we have the same values in the brackets? We do. That means we're heading in the right direction. At this point, we're going to get the values outside the brackets, put them in one bracket, and then we get one of the brackets. Like so, we equate it to 0. So if you notice, in the previous subtopic, when we're looking at quadratic expressions, we're actually ending from here. Okay, but because we have equated it to 0 here, meaning each bracket is supposed to be equated to 0, and then we find the actual value of x. So meaning here we're going to say 2x plus 3 is equal to 0, or x minus 1 is equal to 0. At this point, we're going to solve for x. So we're going to group the like terms by saying 0, this positive 3 crosses, it becomes negative 3. And then we're going to say 2x is equal to negative 3. We divide both sides by 2. Here they cancel, meaning we're going to have x as negative 1, like that. That will be our value for x. If you want, you can leave it here, or you can simplify all the way there. So this is the first value of x. Then we can say, or x is equal to 0. When this negative 1 crosses, it becomes positive 1. We can push it this side by saying x is equal to positive 1. So these are the two values for x. So in one space, you plug in this one. In the other space, you plug in the other one. And you are done. Alright, so now you notice there are also these types of quadratic equations which are phrased this way. Okay, like these ones here. You have double brackets equated to 0. Actually, these are the simplest to solve. Why? Because if you notice, this stage here is the same as what we have there. So in other words, they've done everything for you. They've just brought the question at this stage. So all you have to do is get each bracket equate it to 0 like we did here. This bracket equate it to 0 like we did, and then you find the value of x. You solve for x. So that is all you're supposed to do when you see such equation. Okay, let me just create some space here so that I can be able to stand properly. Okay, so this one is 3x minus 5 in one bracket, so that is b. We have 3x minus 5, close, open, x plus 2 is equal to 0. So we simply get this bracket equated to 0. Or, and the other bracket also we equate it to 0. And then we solve for x. So now we're going to say 3x is equal to 0 plus 5. This negative 5 crosses, it becomes positive. 3x is going to be equal to 5. We divide both sides by 3. By 3, this will cancel. X is going to be, you can leave it there, or you can say x is equal to 1 and 2 over 3, and you're done. And I'm going to say, or x is equal to 0 minus 2. This positive 2 crosses, it becomes negative, or x is equal to negative 2, and you're done. We go to C. C is 2x minus 5, close, open, x plus 3 is equal to 0. We equate each bracket to 0. 2x minus 5 is equal to 0, or x plus 3 is equal to 0. So we're going to say 2x is equal to 0 plus 5. On this negative 5 crosses, 2x is equal to 5, divide both sides by 2. By 2, here the 2's cancel. X is going to be equal to 5 divided by 2 gives us a 2, remainder 1 over 2, and you are done. Here we're going to say x is equal to 0 minus 3. When this positive 3 crosses, it becomes a negative. Or x is equal to negative 3, and you are done. Alright, so that is how you solve those questions. So there's no need for you to start expanding. Okay, I've seen some students who start expanding. They'll say 2x times x, and then 2x times positive 3. Then they come to this one, negative 5 times x, negative 5 times 3. And then they simplify. When they simplify, now they come up with the original quadratic equation. And then they start looking for the factors again. Stuff they've already done for you. So there's no need for you to start doing that. When you find this question in the exam, you can even consider it a free mark because it's very simple at this stage. Alright, so that is that. We now go to the last one. Let's start it from somewhere up here. And I need a bit of some space. So the last one is x squared minus 7x is equal to 8. X squared minus 7x is equal to 8. So now this one looks a bit different from the quadratic equation. What should happen is the same thing as what we've been doing with that general formula. You have to make sure that all the terms are arranged according to this format, and then you equate it to a 0, since we're dealing with a quadratic equation. So minimum, I'm going to say x squared minus 7x, and then this positive 8 will have to cross the equal sign to come this side, and then it becomes negative, and then we equate it to a 0. At this point, we can now find the values of a, b, and c, the sum, the product, and the factors. Okay, so what is our a? Our a is coefficient of x squared, which is a 1. Our b is negative 7. Our c is negative 8. And then our sum is the same as b, which is negative 7 as well. The product is found by multiplying a times c, so it's 1 times negative 8, which is giving us negative 8. At this point, we need to list the factors of negative 8, the product. So we are going to have 1 and 8, okay? And then the next one, the next smallest number that can go into 8 without leaving a remainder is a 2. Then we divide 8 divided by 2 gives us a 4. At this point, we are done listing the factors of 8. And then we make sure in each bracket, the biggest number should have the same sign as the sum. Our sum is a negative, meaning the 8 is supposed to be a negative and the 4 is supposed to be a negative. And then we can try to test. When we multiply each bracket, are we getting negative 8? Okay, 1 times negative 8 gives us negative 8. 2 times negative 4 gives us negative 8. The first test has been passed. The last one now is to determine which of these brackets can we add to get negative 7. So let us try with the first one. Okay, for this one, let's try with the last one. Alright, so we're going to say 2 plus negative 4 to see if we're going to get the sum there. So it's going to be positive times negative is negative, which is going to give us negative 2. So these are not the numbers we're looking for. Let's try this one. So we have 1 plus negative 8. 1 positive times negative is negative. This now gives us negative 7. And our sum is negative 7, meaning these are the numbers we're looking for. 1 and negative 8. We check. What variable are they using in the question? They're using an x. So we need to add an x to each of these two factors. So meaning we're going to have 1x and negative 8x, is it? Alright. And then we mentioned the time we're doing an introduction to algebra that when the coefficient of a variable is 1, we do not write it. So instead of us saying 1x, we're just going to say x. So now these are the values we've been looking for. We can now plug them into our question. So you can see that the x can best be paired with the x squared, the negative 8x with the negative 8 here. So we're going to say x squared, the x is positive, plus x, then we have the negative 8x, then we bring down the negative 8, we equate it to 0, and then we put them in brackets. And then we factorize this bracket. What's common there? X is common. X squared divided by the x squared divided by x is x. Positive divided by positive is a positive. X divided by x gives us a 1. What's common there is negative 8. Negative divided by negative will give us a positive. 8x divided by 8 will give us x. Negative divided by negative will give us a positive. 8 divided by 8 will give us a 1. Okay, we check how are we doing. Inside the brackets, the values are the same, meaning we're heading the right direction. At this point, we get the values outside the brackets. Oh, we're supposed to be equating. We forgot here. Okay, x minus 8, we put in one bracket, and then we pick any of the brackets here. We equate it to 0, which brings us again to this stage and that stage. At this point, we need to equate each bracket to 0. So meaning it's going to be x minus 8 is equal to 0, or x plus 1 is equal to 0. And then we solve for x. X is equal to 0. When this negative 8 crosses, it becomes a positive. X is equal to positive 8, or x is equal to 0. When this positive 1 crosses, it becomes a negative. Or x is equal to negative 1. And you are done. So that is pretty much that. Like I mentioned last time, you've seen how similar they are to quadratic expressions. So since we've already done quadratic expressions, this should be pretty much simple. Yeah, because the additional stages that we have been doing today, they are quite simple as well. The only challenge comes here. So once you pass here, everything else becomes simple because we've been factorizing from the start and we are still factorizing up to this point. So that is pretty much it for today's session. In tomorrow's session, we're going to look at the other types of quadratic equations. Because there are also quadratic equations that look different from what we have done today. So that's what we're going to be looking at in tomorrow's session. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Remember to solve, solve, and solve, because mathematics is a practical subject. If you want to get better, you have to make sure that you're solving. That's how you're going to get better. That is the leakage to getting better. There's no need for you to start looking for leakages. Okay, that is all you need to know. Solve and solve and solve. That way, you become good at it. And things will just be flowing. Most of these questions, you just be looking at them as 3 marks. And you get your distinction. Alright, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next session.